Hello, everyone. I hope we are live already. I'm Eloi Pardo, Director of the Master in Digital Product Management. And today in our BTS talks, we have Sergio Gago. Welcome.
Thank you very much, Eloi, and welcome everyone. Thank you for coming. My name is Sergio. I am the Director of the Masters of Big Data and AI here at BTS, but I am also the head of AI and quantum computing at Moody's. I do a little bit of investment as a business angel, and I am in general a geek that loves to tinker with technology and play with new stuff and have fun with it.
And that's why we have you here today. We would like to start understanding a little bit how is the structure when we talk about tech companies. What are the responsibilities of certain roles, or especially the ones that lead, or what we like to say that lead technology on the organizations, right? So first of all, we like to understand what exactly is a CTO, right? What are the responsibilities and the role there?
I wish I knew. But the reason I say this, and maybe the reason why many of you are joining this webinar, is because the Chief Technology Officer, obviously, as the name says, is the person that's in charge of the technology of the company. But I bet that if we ask every CEO around the world what a CTO is, we may get as many different answers as CEOs or companies in the world. And that is what makes the role both challenging and super interesting at the same time. But maybe we can start from the beginning. At the end of the day, the CTO or Chief Technical Officer is the main responsible for the technology of a company. Whether it is a small startup with just a few people on the engineering team, which means that this person would be building the things himself, would be rolling up his sleeves or her sleeves and doing the coding and preparing everything, designing the architecture. Maybe it is a company in data and needs to think about the data pipelines, ETLs, and stuff like that. Maybe it is the CTO on a larger company, something like a scale-up, maybe a few hundred people already, and then there is a little bit of a structure in the team. You will have some directors of engineering or tech leads and lots of engineers in your team, in which case you become more like a manager, a traditional manager in the sense of what we understand of it, but still one that understands deeply how technology works, because you need to talk with your people, with your team in the same terms. And then you have larger companies where you become more like the person on the strategy that thinks about all the future stuff, like what technologies bring into our company. Do we have any competitive advantage? What about cybersecurity? What about compliance? What about legal?
You were saying that the role of the CTO is slightly different between maybe it's the size of the company. I guess it's also different between the industries, how mature is the company, if they are very data-driven, or they are have more technology, or the technologies are driven maybe for other type of business, or they have more business offline than online. So how are these differences? It's like the roles are slightly different, the type of professional they are looking for is slightly different. How does it work exactly?
That is exactly right. And one of the important things that the CTO will need to understand is the domain of where he or she works. You need to understand the industry so that you can transfer that or translate that into technical requirements. Now, you may be thinking of a company as a digital first company, an internet startup, for example, that has a very, very big core technology component. In those cases, the CTO is a fundamental person in the executive team, in the senior leadership team, in the board. Sometimes maybe it is a co-founder or the founder of the company, and the decisions that this person makes are make or break in the company. Maybe the company that we're talking about, maybe I don't know, it's retail, a shop that sells clothes. So the technology component would be a little bit different. You still need technology. Potentially, that's going to make the difference on whether you have a competitive advantage. And we have a fantastic example in Spain, for example, Inditex Group. It's most of you will know Zara or Bershka and these type of brands. One of the reasons why this brand became so big and made so much money and still thriving is because they were able to use technology to manage their inventory in the quickest way possible and have a just-in-time type of delivery. You could not do that without technology. But still, the role of technology there is different than if you're building an internet portal, or if you have a blockchain-related company or an AI-first company. So how deep you go as a CTO will depend on your industry, whether technology is a core component of your business strategy, and also whether you were a co-founder or not of the company, and in what stage you actually joined. A second thing that may be different is how your team is composed. Sometimes you may use third-party companies or outsource elements. Sometimes you may buy things from third-party providers. For example, if you are an e-commerce company or you're a retail company with an e-commerce component, maybe you don't need to build an e-commerce platform by yourself, because that has been already invented, right? It's very difficult, or probably you will not create anything from scratch that's going to make a difference. What you need is pretty straightforward. You need a listing of products, you need the ability to put prices and manage inventory, you need a shopping cart, you need a payment gateway so people can pay you. All those things have been invented. I'm sure all of you have bought things online, right? So it wouldn't make sense for a company to hire a CTO, put together a huge engineering team to build a shopping or an e-commerce platform from scratch. Most likely you will use some of the platforms or tools that are out there, either proprietary, commercial, or open source. And most likely you will have help from the outside to get these things and customize those for your own business or for your own need. Sometimes it's a marketing company where what matters is the delivery, how easy for you is to get to acquire new customers. And as a CTO, you are supporting your chief marketing officer or your chief revenue officer or sales officer.
So in this case, Sergio, you will say that the CTO has more responsibilities about understanding how technology facilitates the business than in building or knowing a lot about technology itself, right?
Exactly. And one of so let me take a step back. Most CTOs, like myself in my case, we come from engineering roles. We are programmers, we're software developers. I always say that the reason I went into management is because I was the worst developer in the room. So eventually we take more roles in a sort of vertical career ladder. And at some point we stop coding or don't code that much and become managers. Now, the problem with engineers, and I'm usually the first at fault at this, is that code is very deterministic. So you can make a lot of mistakes on the code, but at the end of the day, if there is a problem on your software, it's because someone didn't code it properly. And you can find that problem eventually, maybe with a lot of headaches, but you can find it and solve it, and then deploy and do all the things that you want. But becoming a manager is completely different. Suddenly the problems are not deterministic, are not in source code. The problems are in humans. We are all different. We all have different days, good days, bad days. Sometimes you have to deal with someone who's toxic in the company. Sometimes you have to deal with, I don't know, layoffs on your company. So it's a big cultural change and mindset change for the engineer. People like us that we like kind of our certainty of the code of the computer, and suddenly we move into something that's more emotional in that sense. And the second thing is who your team is. Sometimes when I speak with other CTOs, I ask them, who is your team? And they will say, oh, my engineers. I have these backend developers here, these front-end developers here, I have these mobile developers, that's my team. And that is only half of the truth. What I tell them is, no, your team is the CMO, the chief marketing officer, the chief product officer, the chief financial officer, and you together work with the CEO of the company. And that's fundamental. And you are in product, right? You know how important it is for the chief technology officer and the chief product officer to have a super tight relationship. That's the magic that creates great products. What we need to build and how do we build it? And how do we keep technical debt at bay and so on? So some CTOs forget that the relationship that they have to create and to curate and to maintain is with the other C-level executives or with the other senior managers and senior leaders of the company, so that that relationship can waterfall down into the team and then create this kind of culture of product-led company.
I super agree what you mentioned. I like this topic that you talk about, like the understanding the professionals or the challenges that you have with professionals, not only about the coding. This we can go back to this point, but also what you mentioned, like it's not about just managing a group of professionals, but also understanding the strategy of the company. And if the strategy of technology is going into one path, the strategy for sales or for human resources or for operations also somehow need to go in the same way, right?
That's right as well. And sometimes it's a big problem because we like to focus on building things. And don't get me wrong, that is what you want from a CTO, an engineer, a geek who loves building stuff and can get lost into the weeds of building amazing things and also nurture that technology-driven innovation. That's fundamental and something that every company really needs. But then it needs to be complemented with the business strategy. So sometimes I've seen many people, many CTOs saying, I don't understand why I have to make these decisions with my team. Maybe I need to hire 3 more engineers, but they don't give me budget. Like, well, can you think why that is the case? Maybe you haven't raised as much capital as you thought in your funding round. So you have to make a decision on whether hiring 3 more engineers or 3 more sales reps that will go out there, sell your product, and bring money to the company so you can actually pay the salaries of your engineers. So it's really important to deeply understand the whole domain of the company. On one side, the industry where you live in. How does your company make money? What is your competitive advantage? How are your competitors doing? What is your strategy in general? Where is your segment, your market, your industry going? Is there any technology that's going to disrupt everything? This is really important now with AI that's disrupting many, many industries, as you all know. And then at the same time, you have to understand the reality of the company. So I'm going to say something that maybe some of you won't like, but it's an certain non-comfortable truth. CTOs need to know about finance. Sorry, guys, you need to know the basics of accounting, the basics of finance. You need to deeply understand how to read a profit and loss statement, a balance sheet. You need what is CAPEX, what is OPEX, and how to deal with your budget. Because only then you can truly understand how your company is really doing. Is it going to survive or not? Is it doing well or not? How about your equity package or your stock options? Are you actually going to make any money with that or not? And then you will be able to talk in the same language with the chief financial officer. And that is the most important thing ever. Sometimes we engineers, and I know this could be a dichotomy because as I've said, we want to be tinkering with technology. We want to be geeks. We want to build things. But then you have to quickly change your hat and be able to talk in plain English. You cannot go to the board and start talking to them about serverless and Kubernetes and containers and technical debt in weird jargon that only we engineers understand. You have to speak with them in the same terms that the senior leadership team talks about. That's how your marketing leader talks. That's how your chief revenue officer talks. That's how your chief financial officer talks. So this kind of triangle to take into consideration, right? Your industry context and everything that is around it. Hence the importance of having years of experience on a given industry. Maybe it's gaming, maybe it is travel, maybe it's training and education, but knowing the industry. 2, talking in the same language as the rest of the C-level executives. And 3, being able to have technology-driven innovation. Put that together in a sandwich, call it a BLT sandwich, and you have the recipe for the perfect CTO.
I like this part that you mentioned because somehow it also could be related to, at least in my role as head of product, but in general in product management roles, where I think it's more common and much related to the job description that we know a little bit of data, a little bit of design, a little bit of technology, a little bit of, or a lot about the business. But I also advocate for making this with the rest of the professionals in our company. Like you don't work isolated in your bucket with your staff and that's it. You work for a company that has a reality in sales, in operations, challenges, problems, opportunities. And the more you know about them, I always think the better professional you're going to be. You are not just coding one thing and that's it, and then the output is the code. You are coding because you expect to get something. You expect some results, you expect that you achieve some opportunities to solve a problem. And the more you know about the salesperson that's going to use your product, or the client is going to use your product, the better decisions probably you're going to make. And I think this applies a lot for the CTOs that you mentioned, but I think it also applies to any level. Somehow, probably not understanding all the details from the financial side, but also understanding, okay, what's the reality? What's the business that we are making here, right?
That's absolutely right. Well, one of the things that I like to do in my companies and the places where I have been working as a CTO is to bring that reality to everyone, to every single engineer. And I know this sometimes doesn't seem very popular. And there was a time where people thought, no, the engineers need to be in the basement, just focus on the code and doing the things that we tell them to do. And reality told us that that doesn't work that well. And I'll tell you why in a minute. So in many companies, I try to get the engineers and pair them up with a sales rep, depending on the company and the business, of course, and take them outside to talk to clients. And you wouldn't imagine how beautiful that is when a sales rep, a sales representative, the salesperson that takes care of an account or a client goes together with a software engineer, having kind of sometimes we call that the pre-sales role, but I'm talking the engineer, the one that's coding things. And then when that person hears the challenges the client has, or sees them in real life, how they use the product he builds or she builds, there's nothing better than that, because you're removing everything in between. And then you get the product manager, the engineer, you pair them together, and that's absolute, complete cohesion on what needs to be done. At the end of the day, as I've said, we engineers, we like to build things that people use. The problem is that sometimes we're not aware of how they use those tools, right? Maybe talking about data, and this is something that I in our program in the masters I manage here at BTS and Big Data and AI. I think this is something that I tell students on the very first day. Traditionally, from all the data science or big data projects that companies in the world have created, about 75% of them failed miserably. And this is from a relatively old report from McKinsey. I think it's from 2015 or something like that. The reason for that, no matter the company, big or small, no matter the project, 6 months or 3 years, 75% of them failed. Imagine if 3 out of 4 projects that you fund or put on your budget fail like that. The 3 reasons for that, right? Reason number 1, you didn't put the right people in that project. And obviously hiring good data scientists, good people for that who know the industry and so on is very, very difficult. Finding managers for them is also very difficult. Reason number 2, this one is specific for big data, but can perspirate into other industries. You don't have the right data or the right annotated data for your project. And reason number 3, which is typically the biggest of them all, is that this team built something that no one wanted. They solved the problem that no one really needed. And that bridge to cross is what you get by being super paired up with your product colleagues, going to see clients, whether they are businesses or companies, and that's how you get that done. I'll give you another example. So you can go with a sales rep as an engineer and just listen to what they say, what they feel, how they like or dislike the product, and see whether the thing that you're building actually makes sense. That is when you build something like a SaaS product or a technology, a software that you sell. But I was once working in a B2C company. It was an e-commerce company. And one of the things we did was picking at random clients on their birthday, and our team, regardless of who they were, would call the clients to give them happy birthday and give them a discount. So that thing that may sound, I don't know, maybe a little fluffy or even stupid, is like, why would you spend some, I don't know, 10 minutes per day with people that are producing, doing that, well, the conversations that used to happen on those calls were amazing. And the amount of ideas that became features or functionalities or user stories and then were implemented and then improved the conversion rates and so on, that was amazing. So yes, every engineer needs to be fully aware of where are they working, for what reason, and for whom. And these people, what they really want or what are they solving. And the chief technical officer needs to be the one supporting that and building those bridges, those connections with the other people in the company.
Yeah, definitely, especially in our industry where we work with a lot of uncertainty. Like we are building or we are innovating a lot of times. It's the first time that we are developing solutions for a problem that we didn't know in the past. So probably the more context you will have about, the easier it's going to be for you to make like the correct solutions, understanding what's an MVP, what's not. At least during our sessions in the digital product management course, we like to say that we should expand at least at the same time in the problem than in the solution. I know it's really, really cool. We like to go directly in the solutions, create some Figma designs, talk with engineers, imagine how the product is going to look like, but at least take some extra time. Take another look on the data, talk with some users, understand what's the current problem around, compare even with competitors. What are they doing with that? Like you can get many exciting ideas. And of course, try to avoid, it's much more common that we all felt, having those situations where you build something that nobody cared about.
I think it takes a lot of humility, right? To have an idea and then see that, well, maybe my idea was not exactly what the people wanted. It's still close, but I need to change it. So it does take humility. And on the engineering side, it may take having to throw things away and, changing your priors, yet another statistical term, right? But changing what convinced you to do the things that you wanted to do. You mentioned MVP, right? Minimal viable product. And that is so fundamental. We typically thought about that on startups, where when you don't have a product market fit, meaning you're building something that you don't know if people are going to be willing to pay for it or not, right? So in those cases, it's really, really important to be able to make mistakes quickly. Typically, we're afraid of making mistakes. And that's fine. That's how we've been raised, right? And different cultures have different aversion or risk to making mistakes. So we have to fight against that and say it's fine. It's actually encouraged to screw up and try again. But if you do it, make sure you smell it quickly and you don't make the same mistake twice. And the good thing is that many larger companies are realizing that, yeah, maybe you found your product market fit, but that changes over time. So you need to adopt this kind of MVP agile mindset, even if you're a 10,000 people company or a 50,000 people company. Continuously change your priors, continuously speak with clients, continuously scrutinizing and being skeptical about is the rug under my feet going to move anytime soon? Going back to artificial intelligence, and I'm sure many of you connected here today, I'm sure that you're interested in this field. This is changing pretty much all the priors that we had. Things that in the past we needed 1 year of full development, now we can do in weeks. So a lot of the things that we used to think about on how to provide value or solve a problem, now there are tons of different ways to do that. So that opens a whole new industry and lots of opportunities for many companies and startups. We see how the usual suspects or the established companies are being beaten by a small startup with just a little bit of money and funding, but because they're quick, they spoke with the customers very often, or they even partnered with them to build something, then they took something to market that everyone wanted very quickly, and well, as a result, made a lot of money.
I would like Sergio to go back a little bit to what we started the conversation today around the role of the CTO, or tech leaders in general, do they need to be the ones that know more about the technology?
Absolutely not. I am always the dumbest in the room, or so I try. One of the responsibilities of the CTO is hiring, possibly one of the most important responsibilities. Actually, that applies to every C-level executive or every head of department, right? We spend a lot of time recruiting or finding the right people that can complement your team. So the challenge here is, how do you find people that fit within your culture of the team that you want to build? And then they try to put all that together and work jointly. So you don't want to be the smartest one in the room that has the answer for everything. You want to be the one that builds that culture, gives your team autonomy, gives them the tool, removes all the blockers, and make sure that they are aligned on the task at hand. Again, it takes a little bit of humility in that sense, but isn't it beautiful when you're surrounded by a team of really smart people and then you let them do their work? And maybe sometimes they need some additional training, or maybe you want to keep them updated and so on. So you keep them groomed and so on. That's one thing. The second one is technology advances so quickly that it's impossible for anyone to just be on top of absolutely everything. So you need to bring specialists that can teach you and your team what are the things that are going to change your business in that sense. So your skills are moving in opposite ways, right? You start your career as a CTO, maybe as the CTO of a small startup. So you are the only developer, and then you hire 1, 2, 3 people, and you realize that you need to start talking more than coding.
And probably at that point, you feel comfortable with the technology that you have in your company. You maybe build it or you participate on this process, right? So it's kind of natural being the leader on that position, right? I guess.
Exactly, that's exactly right. But at some point, someone will come and will say, look, this is not anymore the most important thing, and now you need something else. Maybe imagine you started thinking that you wanted to build a web application, and 2 years in, you realize that your client actually want a mobile app, and you've never developed mobile apps. And I say this example because it happened to me exactly like that. I've never coded mobile applications myself, but I was able to hire the right people, the right individuals with the right skills to build a team, to build mobile apps, and then use my skills to communicate, put everyone together, and work towards building a product that everyone wants. So yeah, less coding and more communicating.
What I feel complex and complicated, it's like you need to keep understanding how this technology is going to be built. Like in this case, the app that you mentioned, you need to trust the correct person, and you need to find the correct person for that position. So somehow you need to keep updated constantly with the technology, and also I guess you're expanding, or in this case, if you're expanding topics around cybersecurity or artificial intelligence, big data, if you didn't work with that, I feel it very complex.
It is, but at the same time, let me take the other perspective of this. Sometimes we try to use technology for the sake of technology or update it for the sake of updating it. Maybe the famous word, we need to do a migration. And sometimes we just do because, hey, there's a new coding language that would do the same thing better or faster, or there's a new framework, or there is a new type of database. But sometimes we forget, what is the business reason for this? Is the famous ask 6 times or 7 times why we really need this? Why do we need to migrate this? Because the system is slow. Is this really a requirement from the users? Yes, absolutely. It's the #1 complaint from customers. Is this the only solution for this? Do a full refactor, a full change on the code base that's going to keep us busy for 8 months? And most importantly, what are the trade-offs? Trade-off management is one of the most important skills of every engineer out there. And trade-off means, because you're doing this, migrating all your code base to Golang or to Scala, what else you are not doing? Sometimes it's new functionalities so that clients need. Sometimes it's deployments to a different or a new client. Sometimes it's losing developers in your team. So it's really, really important to consider all those elements as well. And there's one comment from the audience that is about communication, and it's super related to this that you just said. If the product people and technology people don't speak continuously and don't share the same incentives, goals, or expectations, then they're never going to be able to work together. That is why for me it's so important that the product teams, as in a squad that has a product owner or a product manager, a technical lead, a bunch of engineers, maybe back-end, front-end, a QA, infrastructure, they work as a single cell, a single squad that can go from 0 to hero, that can go from ideation to deployment, and that they have full extreme ownership and accountability. So you'll have this squad of multifunctional people. Among the 4, 5, or 6 of them, they have everything they need to create value to the customer. That's it. Generate value. So you can go and tell them, what are you going to do this quarter to generate value on this specific goal, KPI, OKR that our company has? Maybe we need to increase conversion rate on our shopping cart. What features and functionalities are you going to do? I'm sure many of you have heard oh, my job is done, now it's blocked by the infrastructure team, or the QA team, or blocked by product, or blocked by someone who needs to approve. That is the enemy that kills companies. The handovers and the lack of goal alignment. In some companies, you have product managers that have the goal of releasing features and just releasing features. And then you have the technology company that has the goal of reducing or removing bugs. So these are completely separate, and they are going in opposite directions. That's when the friction comes. The product manager comes and says, hey guys, we need to increase revenue from this product. And for that, we think that the best thing is create this feature. And then the developers will say, no way. If we do that, we're going to create bugs, or we need to do this bug fixing or create those tests. So we're not going to do it. And then, of course, the fight begins. And the CTO and the CPO have to discuss, and typically they don't get along very well. And it ends up in a purely chaotic environment that ends up being toxic, as a matter of fact. But if the product managers or the heads of product and the heads of technology get together and say, what is more important? To keep stability in the product and reduce the number of bugs so that we stop clients from leaving, or creating new features so that we can acquire new customers. Either one is fine. There is no right or wrong answer. The only wrong answer is the one that separates the team. And then maybe you choose, okay, we're going to build new functionalities and see what happens. You work 3 or 4 months with that, and then you people then roll back and say, that was the bad idea. We move into stability, because otherwise we're going to acquire customers and then lose them. And that is the right conversation to happen.
So at the end, the key here is alignment between the top management on the strategy that we want to follow. Like, okay, it will be nice that at some point we want to develop more features, or at some point, okay, we need to feature freeze, we stop it, we break everything, let's step back, and let's fix what we have it to keep adding value later, right?
Correct. And typically a full feature freeze is usually impossible, because companies are alive, clients are there, they are asking you things, you have some budgets to hit, you have to make money to meet the month's end. So you need that. And as a CTO, you have to understand that the company needs to make money, or has some stakeholders or shareholders, and otherwise there could be much larger problems, right? So it's all about the trade-offs that I was mentioning before, and about this full alignment between the CPO, the CTO, and the CEO. So in the worst of the cases, the CEO has to sort of liaise between those two and be the arbiter of those two. Sometimes the CFO would come in and would say, no, we're not going to hire any more people because we have no money, right? Sometimes the chief marketing officer will come and will say, no, 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 no. What we need is these features on the CRM so we can run more campaigns or whatever, depending on your business. So there's always going to be a tug of war type of game. So some people decided in the past, okay, what if we, in order to remove the problem or to eliminate the problem, we just cut it completely and we make the position disappear. And for a few years, it became famous to have what people call the CTPO, Chief Technical and Product Officer. So there are some pros and cons about this, but I personally don't like it because it becomes a sort of a Judge Dredd situation. I don't know if you've watched the movie, right? The Judge Dredd is the one that can execute the law and create the punishment on the spot. Now, there is a reason why we have separation of powers in democratic countries, right? You want someone to create laws and someone to, the police to execute them, and then some judges to evaluate whether you have been a bad person or not.
Yeah, at the end, you will have kind of a conflict of interest at some point, or you choose different points of view of seeing things.
It always happens. So as a CTPO, either you come from product or you come from technology. God forbid you don't come from any of those places, because then you're going to be in a very bad place. But usually it's either one, and you will always fall back into your safe bet, right? If you come from technology, you will end up making technology-only decisions. It's inevitable. It's in our genes, and the same thing from product. So I really, really like the situations that we should strive to get is when there's a CPO and a CTO, and they ally to go to the CEO and the CFO and say, guys, if we want to hit these business goals, we have to build together this thing, and this is what we need. And that is a blessing when a company manages to get this kind of alliance between the roles.
I didn't mention it, but if anyone from the audience wants to share their thoughts or any question, we can spend the last maybe 5-10 minutes answering questions there. Probably there are going to be some interesting ones. Before going there, I would like to touch two more topics. Two or three more topics. Let's see how it goes. The first one, it's about developing a career as a manager. You mentioned it that you were the dumbest in the room, which I don't believe. How you make yourself like a manager? I guess you're looking for a position, or there is an opportunity in your company. Of course, it's going to be this challenge. But you mentioned that you need to be aware at least about the finance model or the business in general in the company, have this sensibility about the data, probably the design, the product, the company in general. But what's normally the classic path for that, right?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question. So usually it's a very organic thing. You are an engineer, you at some point become a tech lead, or you start managing a team of 2, 3, 4 people. And that's really like working with your friends. You just happen to be the most senior, or the one who knows the code base better, the ones who know a bit more about architecture and system design. So organically, people go to you when they have questions, or maybe they're more junior in their careers and so on. And then you realize, well, people are coming to me. So then my boss is asking me to manage their holidays. Or when there's a conflict between two, I have to liaise on that conflict. Sometimes I have to organize the work. Like, okay, there's a new feature to develop in one component. And we have person A who knows everything that needs to be known about this component. And we have person B who has never touched it. If person B does it, it's going to take 2 weeks. If person A does it, it's going to take 3 days. So who does it? Initially, you would say, of course, the one that does it quicker. But what's going to happen when this person goes on holidays? You will not be able to maintain support or do anything on that component or on that functionality. So suddenly your brain changes and it starts thinking on those lines, right? Okay, what's going to happen if this person leaves? Is it going to be a big problem, or we're going to have any big risk on the company? You start thinking, what would happen if someone accesses our database because we leak our passwords or keys? Would we be in legal trouble? Most likely, yes. So you start switching your mindset, maybe because you're getting closer to management, and you get there. So now I'm going to get a bit grumpy grandpa here. A few decades ago, when I started my career, the only way to make more money in the technical field was to become a manager, period. As a developer, yeah, you could become a senior engineer and all that, but there was a ceiling in there that you could not cross at all. So if you wanted to keep progressing in your career, you had to switch over to a management path and then become a team lead, and then an engineer manager, and a senior engineer manager, a director, sometimes VP of engineering, and so on. Luckily, that is not the case anymore. More and more companies today understand and accept that there needs to be a technical path and a management path. And this is a really important thing. And for those of you in the audience, I really urge you, those in development who are in this kind of situation, really think if you want to be a manager. It is really easy to find someone who is doing a fantastic job, the perfect engineer, right? The perfect software developer, and then think, well, this guy is doing, or this girl is doing such a wonderful job, I'm going to make that person the manager.
Classic error.
Classic error, because what happens is that you lose a fantastic engineer and you get yourself a terrible manager. It is not the next step in the ladder. It's not the next step in the staircase for you to grow. It's a horizontal step where you need to unlearn many things. That dichotomy I was mentioning before, from being less deterministic, less rational, and more emotional, or dealing with more emotional elements. And it's a step that you have to take very, very willing, and knowing and understanding what is the situation. So as I was saying, luckily today in many companies and more, you can actually keep making more money and progressing in a sort of career path, becoming a staff engineer, a fellow, and stuff like that. Different companies have different titles for this. Or you can choose the management path. Now, what is the challenge for a CTO? If you want to become a chief something in business officer, marketing, sales, a CEO or something, but people take MBAs, for example. That's a usual path. Executive management programs and so on. But there is not an MBA for CTOs. There are no programs out there that give you the right tools, the right skills, and change your brain a little bit to move you into the management role. There is an organic way, which is the co-founder of a startup or the early employee of a startup that grows organically with the company. There's 3 of you at the beginning, so everyone does everything, and you are the one who does the coding, fine. And then you get some money, you get some funding, you start hiring engineers, you make a ton of mistakes. Maybe with some luck, you have a mentor or some advisors. And then at some point you have, I don't know, 30 engineers. You're still not a fully fledged CTO, but you're learning on the job. And then after that, after you have your first title, you start growing on your number of engineers that you manage. So I like this distinction that some people make on the types of CTOs, right? You can be the CTO of your house. That is the small house, the smallest startup where you are still coding, you're still doing everything yourself. And then at some point you can become the CTO of your building or of your community. And now you have 1 or 2 squads of people, and suddenly you can still be technical and know all the in and outs, all the guts of your systems, but now you have to manage some souls around you. Then you can become the CTO of your neighborhood, and suddenly you are a manager of managers. And that's another big change, right? You're not managing directly the people doing the thing, the individual contributors. Now the people reporting to you are engineering managers, directors, and so on. And that's a whole level of difficulty and challenges and so on. Then you can become the CTO of your city. That's like being part of a larger company with maybe a few thousand people or 1,000 engineers in the company. And eventually you can become the CTO of your country, which would be the CTO of a very large Fortune 500 company, or the CTO of a huge organization. Nothing prepares you for that except the job and your willingness to really take on those on those challenges. But there's only one thing that I would tell you guys on this, which is just take the plunge. You don't have to wait until you have the skills to do it. Most of it, rest assured, is learning on the job. But ideally, you would have an advisor or a mentor or someone that can handhold you as you go. Now, if you allow me, Eloi, maybe I can do a little bit of advertisement here, because I was so sick of not having the right resources on how to become a CTO. That at some point last year, I decided to put all that together in a book. And I mean, this is what brought this conversation. So a couple of months ago, I published my last book. It's called the CTO Toolbox, which talks a lot about the things that we're talking about here.
Which I have to, I finished just yesterday. I completed the book, and I really recommend it. It's full of interesting points. I would like to highlight then like a couple of them, but yeah, definitely congratulations for the job.
And all the proceeds from the book are donated to two NGOs, teaming.net and Migra Code Barcelona, that use technology to make the world a better place. So if you're interested in that and want to do a good deed today, please go ahead and take a look at the book. It's called the CTO Toolbox. You can find it on Amazon, and happy to sign it for you if we happen to meet in Barcelona sometime in the future.
There are 2 points that you mentioned before, but where I would like to emphasize. When talking about managers, you mentioned that the errors or the challenges that you face when you work in coding or work with projects in general, let's say, versus working with humans is slightly different. The errors that you can commit when you're working in projects, at the end, it's just a matter of probably hours, spending more time finding the bug, understanding if you need to pivot somehow. But when you're talking with humans, professionals, what you say in one sentence or what you say in a meeting cannot be undone. So this is very difficult at some point to manage and to guide the people in the correct path. So you need to be much more careful on what you say, how you manage things, or how you organize it. And I think this is much more important than what we all thought. And the other thing that you mentioned, which I really like, is somehow that before being a manager, you need somehow to gain it, right? You need to gain the credit, being probably the one that people goes and makes questions, to organize things, to be somehow proactive on certain responsibilities that maybe no one wants. Then you somehow prove it that you, and I feel it totally related to this point, because I was working as a product manager and there was a team with no PM. And I was like, okay, let's move on. I can manage 2 teams at the same time. And it wasn't pain in the ass, as you can imagine. The schedule was much more complicated. But somehow I proved it that I was able to work at some point with 2 teams at the same time. I prove I can add value and bring impact to the company. So somehow I always encourage that before asking or when waiting for the opportunity, take the opportunity yourself. It's gonna be there, definitely.
That's exactly right. And I would highlight the element of creating rapport, creating trust with your team. It's impossible to lead a team if they don't trust you. And how do you build trust with a team of deeply technical people? By being deeply technical. And you don't have to be smarter than them. You don't have to know the things they know. You just have to share the same passion for technology. And when you have that, when you have a team that really trusts you and goes with you to the gates of hell and back, that team can build anything you drop at them. Once you get that glue, man, that's so amazing. I like to think about communication, which is at the end of the day the mother of all the skills. Communication, speaking, really communicating properly, understanding that in a multicultural environment where, like, I guess most of you connected come from completely different countries, right, and different cultures and education backgrounds and so on. First of all, English is not my first language, right? I use it for work every day, but I have my thick Spanish accent when I talk in English, and maybe sometimes I misuse a word or two. But most likely the person in front of me is not going to be native English speaker either. Maybe it's someone from somewhere else in the world. So it's really easy to create miscommunications. This is especially true in written communication. Slack, Teams, or chat in general creates so many problems because of communication, right? Nothing beats taking someone to a bar and drink a beer and create a personal relationship. At the end of the day, who do you work better with? With someone that you enjoy being together with, or with someone that you think is an asshole because sent you a message that looked passive aggressive, right? And of course, one of the key pillars of communication, besides knowing what you're talking about and the content of what you're saying and the way you're communicating it, is who are you? Tell me those things. What kind of credentials you have? And that is the rapport that you build. What the Greeks called ethos, pathos, and logos in the art of communication.
I would like to spend the next 5 minutes answering some questions. I think we already answered some of the ones that they just shared with me, the audience shared with me. The first one is pretty related to what you just last mentioned. It's about the cultural fit. Like how important is for you when you are hiring someone or someone is joining the company or you are joining a new company, how important is for you or how you manage understanding the cultural part of that person or that company?
I think for me is the most important part. I mix together culture and aptitude. So whether someone is eventually able to do what's going to be required from him or her, and that's going to fit in that group. And different companies have different cultures. Skills can be taught. You can train people, you can mentor them, you can help them. But no matter how good someone is at any given task, if they don't fit in the culture, that person and the company is going to be miserable. So the most important thing is, looking at that person in the eyes and saying, yes, you're going to do a fantastic work here because you fit within the culture. And sometimes we talk about company culture as if it is a thing that you can describe, and that's really difficult. You cannot describe those things. Sometimes it's a bit of a gut feeling. But sometimes you have companies that have a very clear ethos by themselves. I'm sure we all know Elon Musk and how he communicates and stuff like that. Well, he drives companies in a very specific way, right? He completely changed the way Twitter used to work on what X is today by pretty much day and night, right? He had to lay off a lot of people and he had to make a lot of statements on that. Most companies are not like that. There's a bit more of a nuance in the situation. But a startup sometimes is this kind of hassle thing where everyone is working many hours and doing everything that they need and so on. And another company maybe is something more stable where you do your hours and you have some work-life balance and that's it. So a place can not be the place for you, and that's completely fine. And also companies seldom change their culture. This is something that I learned the hard way. There's this parable of the Theseus boat. Theseus used to be a Greek hero who had this ship, and with this ship he won many battles, right? So people thought that the boat had magical powers. And the years went by, and the boat was there in the docks, and eventually it started breaking apart, right? And people were replacing parts, replacing the sails and the woods and the planks and all the different parts of the boat, to the point that at some point, after many years, the boat changed completely. There were no original parts of Theseus' boat. So the question is, does that boat still have that kind of magical powers that let its sailors win any battle? And in the concept of companies, the answer is yes. Sometimes you see how engineering teams that have a very specific culture, there's full rotation, everyone changed on the team, but the new group behaves exactly the same way as the team before, right? So understanding where someone is in the right moment in their life, right experience, and the right cultural fit is probably one of the biggest indicators of someone thriving or failing at a given job.
I was thinking about the Madrid football team. They replace all the players and they still win, which I really hate because I'm a Barcelona supporter. But yeah, I think it's more or less the same story. Like the culture is so strong that they keep acquiring the same benefits.
It is.
That's a good example.
Companies have their own soul by itself sometimes.
Yeah, I think we can do one more question and we can finish it here. This is kind of the elephant in the room. How is AI and no code or low code solutions changing the way that you and your companies work?
How it isn't, I would say. But we can focus on coding, right? Which is one of the most obvious cases. So suddenly you got an army of good friends coding just next to you. That doesn't mean that they're going to give you the best suggestions all the time or even correct suggestions. They're giving those suggestions to you in a way that's fully integrated on where you are working. I'm sure many of you have tried ChatGPT for these type of things. Like, can you create a tic-tac-toe game for me and whatnot? Let me take a step back. The way we usually code is we think in systems. Maybe we design the system, we design the architecture, and we start thinking about the high-level blocks or elements. Then we think about our components and classes and functions, and then we drill down into those systems. Maybe some of you like to do test-driven development and other techniques, which is fantastic. But roughly speaking, that's usually the process. And then at some point, you have to actually code a given functionality. You need to code a sign-up form for your website. And maybe you're coding in a new language, or maybe it was a long time ago since you did that. So what do? You search on Google. And most likely you would end up in Stack Overflow and sites like those. And then you will copy and paste some code from there and you will execute it and it runs. And then you think a little bit and tweak a little bit the code and maybe you write some test. And then at some point it does what you want it to do. And you do a commit on your repository and submit it maybe for a pull request so that your team can review it and tell you whether it fits the coding standards that your team has or not. In my company in Moody's, we did an experiment with GitHub Copilot specifically last year, right after it launched, because we didn't know to what extent it would help. Some people thought, no, this is going to be good for junior developers who are still learning the functions and the trade and so on. Some other people say, no, this is actually better for senior developers, so they don't have to do all the coding themselves, but they can evaluate the output quickly. Some people thought, no, this is great for front-end developers. No, this is great for back-end developers. So we decided to experiment and build different cohorts with different skills for data scientists, for front-end, back-end developers, and we run it for 3 months. We built both a quantitative and a qualitative experiment. So on the latter, we asked people how they felt, if they thought that this was a good tool to use, if they thought that it would improve their skills and would become better developers. For the quantitative test, we actually measured how quickly and how good the code was. And lo and behold, we actually proven that on average, we got 40% improvement on our coding capabilities across the cohorts, no matter whether you were senior, junior, or anything like that. So imagine you could be 40% more productive just by using one of these tools that costs you $20 a month. I'm using it every day, and I haven't gone into Google ever since. Now I type my unit test automatically. Now, whenever I have a problem in my code, it's much easier to find the issue. Whenever I have to evaluate code from someone else, and I'm having a hard time kind of understanding what is going on, I can do it like this. So I am definitely much more productive. I don't know if 40% or 30 or maybe 60 sometimes, but for developers, guys, we truly need to use this. And then agents are going to come. I don't want to give spoilers here, but at some point we will have systems doing a lot of the work for you. So every one of us will have an army of interns, if you like, working for us.
Sergio, I think we are running out of time. Thank you so much for coming today. Thanks everyone for joining these BTS talks. And yeah, if you want to follow any of these topics, you can stay connected with us through Barcelona Technology School. Thank you so much for attending today. I think that's it.
Thank you, Eloi, and thank you everyone for coming. See you in Barcelona soon.